I'm Clint, and welcome to Swatches Art Livestream number 103. We have Fantasy Races entries from you guys in the Fantasy Races Art Challenge to be looking at this episode. Now, we'll be taking a couple of minutes to go through some announcements, allow people a chance to join in live before we kick into the images, but we have, I believe, 6 images to look at here with this challenge. If you're new to the channel, thank you for making time to come by. I'm illustrator Clint Curley. I've been working professionally in Illustrator field for over 10 years. You can see links below in the video description if you want to check out some of my work. But, okay, just checking over the stats. It looks like I'm not getting dropped frames, which is good. Actually, normally I would be if I had this other program running, but it looks like it's doing okay, so I will just leave it there. Kayla, Olivia, Bass, Matthew, Silux, Wolfgang Dragon, and Nito. Hey, welcome everybody. I didn't get any message from Anna whether she was going to make it or not today, so that's why there's an Anna question mark. She is not here right now. So maybe they will be joining later, but for right now, it's just me doing the challenge. That's okay. That's the way we did it for years. So let's go through the announcements. New is the Swatches hoodie. So YouTube teamed up with Teespring, the company, in order to be able to offer channel merchandise through the Teespring service. And recently I went out there and tried to learn a little bit about how to use that, what you can make, and I created a black hoodie with the Swatches logo, something that I've actually ordered me one, and hopefully it'll come in soon. But yeah, it's a full front, zippered in the front. I don't really like the pullover that much. I like the ones that I can zipper. It has the little pockets, I believe, for your hands on the front, the big logo on the back, so you can check that out. And I forget exactly where you find that on the channel. It's a new thing. I haven't looked exactly to see where that's listed, but yeah, that's out there, and hopefully we'll be coming out with some other new merchandise as well. Okay, well, we don't actually have a sponsor for this episode, but I'm going to say, hey, we're self-sponsoring, and I'm going to promote the illustration process. It is basically the culmination of what I learned over the last 10 years of doing illustration and what you need to do to go from reading a brief, doing the sketches, doing your studies, and getting to the final. It also addresses a lot of the issues that come up over and over again in these art challenges. So if you're going to get in an art challenge, if you're going to get in a contest, if you want to move from being more hobby to being more of a professional, and you want to have a professional approach to how to do an image, that's what this is. It is really packed full of information. I don't burn a lot of time in this. It's 3.5 hours of instruction with everything annotated on screen. You can read it, examples for everything. And it has been edited and edited down so that it is really dense of information. It has demonstrations in there. This is a really good answer to a lot of the questions that I get and problems that I see come up in these art challenges and people who are trying to go more professional. So if you haven't checked that out, it's swatchesart.com. You can find it out there in the store. Also, if you have not already, join the community over on the Discord server. You can see the link there, the link down below as well. And if you want to schedule an hour consult with me, then you can go out to art-mentor.com and schedule an hour consult. Timestamp Timothy says, who was the artist that drew the rabbit on the live stream thumbnail? We will, let's see, offhand, it's one that we'll be looking at here. That was Bass. Bass will be the first one we looked at. Yep. Okay, is anything else? I think that's it. That's all I thought to put on there. Oh, of course, please like, comment on the video. YouTube really promotes things more that are upvoted, and they also share things more that are commented on. It means people really are engaged by it and they want to interact with it. Okay, now we don't have a full stock all 12 this time. We just have the 6 entries. So we're going to start with Bass. Now, if you are just joining in and you don't know what this challenge is, I could quickly pull that up for you. I'm not going to read it all. You can pause the video if you want to read the full description. But essentially, the challenge is designed to be like an actual commission that you would receive from a company. So the artists had the choice between illustrating characters to represent one of 3 different races, and they needed to choose 2 of those. The Arbalon are squirrel-like people about the size of a halfling. The Arnora are also a smaller size, about the size of a dwarf. These are fantasy races for something like D&D or Pathfinder, and they are large heads and no facial hair. We're trying to keep them away from dwarves, but we also want to give them maybe more of a animalistic, frog-like, something like that, in order to take them away from being halflings. A little unclear what it is. Wanted some imagination there. And the Zez are tall, fungi, mushroom type people, elemental sort of creatures. So that's that. They were also given a page of inspiration images. These are not my images. I found them on the internet that I thought exemplified various things. Well, that one's mine on the left. The rest of them are not. The rest of them exemplify various things about the subjects in order to inspire and help direct the artist. Close those. Bass is the first one here. It says, hey Clint, I'm really digging the challenge. Had a lot of fun so far. Excellent, excellent. I wish I had a little bit more time to work on the sketches. I want to do a bit more iterations and find some references, but alas, time's up. I'll be having a lot more time on my hands the next 2 weeks, so I should be good. Thanks in advance for the feedback. Okay. So I really like several of the things that Bass is doing here. Let's pull up and start with his concepts. This is the page of his rougher concepts. And this is really what you want to do. Same sort of thing that I would recommend in the illustration process material. And that is, you want to do some rougher sketches where you're going through a lot of different varieties. You're just brainstorming, because getting a good character is often an issue of iteration. And you need to go through several variations. You need to start working with the idea and getting some momentum with it before your brain is really going to start putting that together. You really need to get your brain having some momentum before it's probably going to come up with your best idea. We have all different kinds of poses, different kinds of classes. We've got like a flying squirrel type. Now, I really like this. And Bass, I think you say Bass. I may be wrong with the pronunciation there. He did send me a message asking me about a couple of ideas and getting some clarifications. For instance, he didn't know if he would be allowed to have the squirrel on the top of this kind of tree thing. I guess it's the top of a bare tree. Whether that prop would be usable or not, I thought it was okay. But he did the right thing and he asked about that. He also asked about the flying squirrel. And I thought that was cool because in my mind, there would be several different types of the Orbulon characters. Ones, I was actually already thinking of some that had the longer ears. So it was kind of interesting to think where somebody else had that thought as well. But he ended up liking this one. I liked it as well, so that's what we're running with. And then he has a whole variety of Zez concepts here. A lot of different shapes. And I think this is something that's really worth taking away on this one is that when you're doing the concepts at this stage, what you want to do is have very clear differences between the different concepts. So this one, we're talking about very low, almost like an old man, almost turtle-esque sort of shapes going on, which is very unlike the others, except for maybe this guy. Some similarities going on there. And this is a better use of your time, and it's also way more shape focused, right? So he's picking out certain shapes, certain forms, and reusing them for each of the concepts. I think he went with one of the strongest ones, the ones that has the most human-like form, that you can still kind of find a humanoid form in there. And that way you could kind of personify it a bit more. Some of the other ones are also interesting, but they a little maybe too inhuman, a little too planty. So anyway, those are those worth looking at. This is a good example of reference images. So he's got a squirrel here, and that is in a very similar pose to the human pose that he's basing the anatomy off of, because they have a proportion, and these creatures, the Orbulon, have a proportion and anatomy that is a cross between those of a human and a squirrel. A regular squirrel doesn't really have very long arms. They wouldn't be able to do a lot of the things that humans could do. Their torso just doesn't stretch out the same. So we're trying to find a medium between the two of them. And finding references of the two that are in similar poses really is nice. I love the variety and the colors there for inspiration, and the idea of it coming down to the bottom and having a dress-like appearance. Very good at all. Also. All right. So let's take a look at the drawing itself. Yeah, that's just a little big. I'm going to pull out on that. Okay, I am offhand fond of both of these. Bass, I think these are both excellent examples. They're nice and clean. They're well drawn. I know exactly what I'm looking at. Very, I would say it's well executed. Now, it is a concept. It is a sketch. I don't necessarily need to see the lighting or the values at this stage. It wouldn't hurt to throw in a little value change, just the general lighting on it. That could have helped a little bit. But this is the main thing. I'm mainly concerned at this stage about the design of the character. The pose is really giving me that explorer vibe, which is nice. I also like that you connect them with of the squirrel with being up high, being in trees, being very comfortable with that. I think that that goes really well to example who these kind of people are and their connection with the forest and nature. Of course, just a reminder to myself and you guys, if you do have a comment for me, make sure you just say Swatches in your comment. It will flag that in orange for me, and I will try to read that during the course of the live stream. And if you have any questions, put that in there. I'll try to answer that as well, especially if you're one of the artists who's getting stuff reviewed. Otherwise, I might miss it. I'm mainly looking for the tags, watches. Okay, so let's step through both of these. I'm gonna I did a little sketching beforehand, and so let's turn that on. So these are some of my thoughts about what could be adjusted here. I'm gonna walk through here. Let's start at the top with his arm. Now, this position, I would be expecting the arm. Maybe I'll just start kind of redoing it. With your arm up like that, I'm gonna expect that shoulder is going to get really high, and we're going to see that shoulder bunch up there a lot more. This is almost like the arm is running straight into the rib cage with no shoulder muscles, no traps or anything going on there. Also, the Arbalon, like regular squirrels, have very almost invisible necks, right? They don't have a long, thin neck like us humans. So we're probably going to have even less space than normal. And we're going to have that coming there, and it's going to overlap. That peck there from the chest comes up, forms up towards that arm. And we're also going to have the traps there. Now, they're not going to be much, but we might want to just think about their form there. And overall, their arms are probably going to be a little bit shorter compared to their body than what humans would be. And in order to help keep some of that squirrelness, we want to think about trying to keep some of that extra hair that they have on the bottom of their arms. So they get this sort of shape. From the side, you can almost think about their arm like the body is over here. The arm does this sort of thing, where it looks really wide next to the body, and then it narrows down to their thin little wrist right there at the hands. And we want to try to keep that, and we have maybe the hands down a little bit. The arms looking a bit long for his body. I'll move it down even. And so we've got the kind of long hair there. Trying to find that medium between the two of them. Same thing here. We're probably going to have a bit more of that fur coming to there. So I'm thinking that you're more likely going to have the wrappings like you have it here, which is you're going to have the greaves there on, it's the greaves, right? They're on the forearm. On the forearm section, and probably not that section since it would have so much extra fur and stuff. Move my window out of the way. Andy says, hey Clint, just wondering, maybe I missed the information. Should there have been feedback videos for the 40 patrons? Yes, those are coming. I apologize, I got behind on some other things. But yes, they will be on their way. We've not had... It should have been done by now, but I tried to get it done before the next cycle, and the next cycle hasn't started yet. Yeah. But no, you didn't miss it. Yes, it will be coming. And no, I'm not sure what's up with Anna. I hope she's okay. I didn't receive any message from her. So, yeah, it's just me today. Okay. Otherwise, I like the proportions of the body. I think this is nice. You're keeping the nice flow of the kind of this S thing going on. His chest is up as he's looking, but his body overall is crouching. I do want to see a change with the anatomy here, and this is talking a little bit about squirrel anatomy. Again, trying to find that line between the two of them. This is basically human legs, and I feel like we probably want to get a bit more of the squirrel, and the squirrels have those really big thighs. Right? Like this, even on the rat character here. We want to match the thighs up more like that, or we're going to see them, we're probably going to have like, maybe that's a bit more like that. And then can we get that digigrade bend to the leg instead of the regular human leg? Let's keep with that. It's going to be something more like that. And we're probably going to see that other thigh more out there, something on that line. Okay, that was one thought. And another one is, if we're going to have him up there like this, let's have the necklace flowing around more. Whatever this little compass thing is, have it kind of swinging, get more swing out of it. That seems a bit more static. And this is a bit of a... I wouldn't say it's a mistake, but I think there's a slight improvement to be made here with the tail. One thing is the tail is too long. Um, Squirrel tails tend to be not quite that long and a little bushier. And also, if I was him and I was using my tail as a counterpoint, then I would be thinking of wrapping opposites around my support. And this is getting a little high level of, and maybe a little picky, but I think it's something worth just kind of talking about for a moment. And that is, if his legs are coming on that side of the tree, I think he would wrap his tail around the opposite side of the tree. Instead of everything coming around the same side, that you've got one going around one side, one going around the other. It's like trying to hold onto a tree with both your arms on one side. You don't do that. You work one hand around each side. So that's where I'd be thinking maybe this is coming under that sword there, but then it was actually going to wrap around in front of the tree here. And we're probably going to have it like that. That way he's got both sides around it. All right, small thing. But overall, I like his accoutrements. I like the way he's designed, his bedroll. You've thought that out. Love the expression. Probably don't really need to change anything with the face. That's looking really nice. And so, yeah, small stuff there. But I thought that was good. Thanks for your reply. Can you please check the concept folder? I'm sure I uploaded the concept in time. I checked the concept folder multiple times. Hang on. Okay, well, I checked it earlier. It wasn't there. I don't know. Maybe there was some sort of delay there. Let me download it. One moment, guys. I'm going to move all my windows around for a second. Oh, no, it's not. There we go. Yeah, it's kind of odd. Normally it shows up there immediately, but I guess there was a delay for some reason. Okay, for the Zez, a few things I was thinking about here. Overall, really good, and you could probably just paint it up here and it would likely work. But if I were to push it further, these are some of the things that I'm thinking. Well, let's talk a moment about why do I think this works pretty well. I think that the understanding of shapes is working well for you here. And this is one of the things that you other guys can be paying attention to. And maybe he was thinking about this when he created it. But you're doing the small, medium, large, medium, and small. So he has a large shape here, right, with this guy. And then he has like medium shapes with these. And then he has small shapes with these. And it's not all large, it's not all mediums, and it's not all smalls. And he's using a variety of them. And I think that overall that helps really well. It also keeps a pretty clean silhouette, a very distinct silhouette, which is also nice. Now, if I were to push it further, what would I do? I would look to probably get this and create a bit more of the bumpy, little thick, bumpy edge on it. Let that sort of be a little more droopy around there and let those pieces come up underneath it. I think that's kind of nice. Also, if we're going to go with this shape, I would just treat the bottom of this as some sort of bulb, almost like a flower. And then you can have the little grooves, and it simply gets dark kind of in some of those grooves, almost like there were eyes or those dark spots that you would sort of look at as eyes. Also playing up some of the other shapes here, getting this shape, this pattern, and then mimicking that more down here, and not just having lots of different kinds of patterns. Variety is good, but if those are similar, let's go ahead and just make them more the same. And then I'm also thinking that these arms probably need to be widened out just a little bit. It feels almost like he's got his elbows kind of tucked up next to his sides, which just feels a little odd. So I'd be trying to push him out a little bit further on each side, give him a little more breathing room next to his body. And I would also consider doing these same sort of shapes here, but having them downwards instead of the mushrooms. I find it odd that like the mushroom has something growing off the top of it. It seems like it should be the top, not necessarily that it has something growing off the top. That's why I'm thinking maybe it comes down here and then it has those sort of shapes. And you've got more of the vining things coming out from the inside of that sort of flower design. If we want to go more with the turn, we've got the head, if you want to think about it like a sphere, you've got the head turned kind of like this, and the chest is turned that. And it makes me think that, okay, well, we're turning this way to get to this one, then I expect that we'd keep turning into where the lower body is even more to the other side. And so that's why I've got this sort of twisty feeling where this is all wrapping around that way. Because essentially, well, it'd be wrapping that way because essentially he is turning the opposite way, right? He's turning and it's pulling that back the other way. And then tossing up some of these other little guys and just making them a continuation. So you've got some of these guys here. I would go more crazy with them down here. And then have some of them where they are. And then we want to continue a couple more. So it's like lots, a little less, right? And you staggered them up the character. Okay, that's it for Bass. I'm not sure what you're thinking about as far as the colors and the lighting. We don't really need to get real fancy with the lighting. Just look at the D&D, look at Pathfinder characters, look at how they're lit. Generally, it's not too fancy. What we really want is very understandability of the character is high priority. Okay, wrap it there. Good stuff. Andy, you just sent yours in, but we're going to open it up because alphabetically I would forget to go back. All right, no comments by Andy. Let's take a look first at the process. We've got like a sword one. Looks like Nancy. Like a druid. I think you found that one. So they did 3 different varied concepts. And then you pick your favorite one. And then you do iterations of that one. And that's exactly what I talk about in my videos as well. And that's what I do when I'm working on a character for an illustration. So it's the right process. And from there, did a couple of lighting variations, light over dark, dark over light over dark, dark over light. A couple of color variations. Had a mannequin. These are easy to get a hold of. Lots of stores online carry these. They're not perfect, but man, they can be really useful. You can't always find a 3D model in the pose that you want. And he is using a model. I've used those before. I used one on Liliana, I believe. No. It was for a Chandra concept. Use one. Okay, he's got some style and rendering references. And okay, immediately comes to mind, and you can probably guess what I'm going to say about this. It's over rendered for a concept. A couple of things that we really needed to do here. Okay, obviously it's rendered well. I'm not mistaking that. It's rendered well. But it's overly rendered with all kinds of lighting, with all kinds of detail, and it hasn't been approved yet. And it's also missing the other guy. The challenge was to do 2 characters, okay? And we just have the one. Now, Andy, you might want to say, "Oh, but I didn't have enough time to do 2." Heck, I don't buy it. All right, maybe he doesn't say that, but that can't be true because this took a lot of time, and that time could have been made to go into concepting one of the other 2 characters that this challenge was about. So next time, if you've got enough time to render this, you've got enough time to actually do both characters for the challenge. Are those Figma posable figures? Cool. Also says she's sorry that she's not home currently. She told me to let you know. Oh, that's okay. Hey, things come up. I totally get it. It's all right. She probably needed a day off anyway. But we will be happy to have her back when she can make it. Yeah, those are the... Unless I'm sorely mistaken, I believe that is one of the Figma. It looks like mine, and mine's a Figma. They're not too expensive. They have a variety of different body types, male, female, and yeah, you got the little stand, and they are pretty well posable. If you're knowledgeable with anatomy, then you can adjust for the things that aren't quite right, and watch which ones you get. There's some of them that are similar, but they've got more of like anime proportions. The head is overly large compared to the body, and the body's like super narrow on the females, giving this like really skinny anime body. Uh, Probably don't want one of those as much as you would rather have this one, which is a more natural proportion. Okay, yeah, I wish we wouldn't have rendered this to this degree and not done the other guy, but this is what we have. So going forwards, if you can, at least give me a concept for one of the other ones, okay? Either the Honora or the Zez. And then on this one, yeah, I'm starting to lose a lot of the actual character. This is, I think I have it out here. Let me put it up. Yeah, like I say in the brief, it says, remember, these characters need to be a good representation of the entire race, not just a unique standalone character. And I think that's what we have here. I think we've gone so specific that this is no longer a representation of the Arbalon race. This is a very specific character. And this is counter to what I've said on before, in that I'm usually saying we really want it to be a specific person. It looks too generic. It looks too generic. What can we do to make it more unique? And that's exactly true for a character illustration. Like if you're doing a specific guardian for this place, there's only one of him, and he needs to look unique. And that's not what this is. So we actually have to tone this back like 50% in order to get it generic enough that she can actually represent the rest of her race and not just be about her. There's kind of a odd line there, but we have to think about that as illustrators. And what is this about? Sometimes you want to get super specific and super unique. And sometimes you actually want to be a little generic. It's like NPCs, NPC soldiers in a game. You want them different, but you don't want them as unique or interesting as the main character, right? You don't want your other NPC squad mates to be cooler than you are because you're the guy playing, right? You should have the coolest character and be the most interesting looking. Yeah, I think the layers maybe are getting like these earlier ones are actually closer. These earlier ones are actually a lot closer to what we need. Where we don't have layers and layers of stuff. There aren't pine cones and all kinds of things everywhere. The other thing to keep in mind is that they are not squirrel size. They're like 4 feet tall. And so when we add in things such as pine cones and pine cone textures, and this changes our perception of their size. This makes me think that she is normal squirrel size because look how big she is compared to that pine cone. And she's not. So we've got to bring her back to being, the normal Arbalon size, which is like 3.5, 4 feet tall. Let's try to step it back to some of your earlier iterations. And I like having a cool staff with like this is what you can do. Like normal clothes, fairly normal clothes. And then she has a staff that has some acorns and the different colored ribbons on it. And that's her unique thing, but not the entire character. Headpiece makes probably not. Let's probably just take out the headpiece. If she wants some sort of little tiara, maybe that can be cool. But yeah. This is almost more like a royalty crown, gold everywhere. We want to make her a little more peasant-like. Let's take her class down a bit. More of a country character. Let's check the anatomy. We want to really make sure this anatomy is good. I feel like the anatomy is getting lost here under some of these layers. This is another one where we could probably play up the lower body, like kind of thin there, get a little more of that squirrel anatomy going on there. Slightly bigger thighs. And also look at the squirrel feet. These feel a little more, they don't feel squirrel-like. Feel more paw-like. Been a while since I've drawn squirrel feet, but double check that and check the thickness of that. And when we're adjusting it, let's adjust her proportions so that her legs, right now her legs are pretty long. Let's try to shorten those up a little bit. Let's get her legs up, her feet up to about here. Compress her proportions a little bit. And that'll help make her be in that right sort of halfling proportion. For the smaller races, you're used to seeing them be less head links. Ideal human, like 8 head links. For these guys, we're not looking at 8 or 7 or probably even 6. We're probably looking at more like 5. And that's going to get us closer. Okay, now that's quite a few changes. Do keep this on the side, and if you want to, can even continue working with it, do so. I do want to say your rendering is great. It's really clean. Everything's separated very well. I think the colors are playing together well. I particularly like the way that you've handled a lot of the loose flowiness of the fabric. I think the way that you've made the gold shine in a lot of the places is working really well. But unfortunately, you skipped over what some of the challenge is about, and lost a little sight of what the overarching goal was, and got a little too lost, I think, in this specific character. Which, hey, happens to all of us. It happens to all of us. But we're gonna stop it there. Best of luck with that, Andy. If going forwards, if you're reworking this and you're not sure if you're quite taking my stuff the right way, shoot me an update. I'll give you feedback whether that's still looking right or not. Janie is up next. Great. Janie says, "Hey Clint, I'm a full-time graphic designer." Been there, Janie. Using my spare time to develop my digital illustration skills. Cool, cool. I realize I probably rendered these further than what was expected for the first round. Oh, that look okay. But I'm happy to completely rework the concepts however you suggest. Looking to learn, Janie. Oh, welcome to the challenge, Janie. Let's start by taking a look at some of your concepts up here. All right, so they are working with the Anura characters and the Arbelon as well. I had a feeling the Arbelon was going to be the most popular. But I do like giving you guys the options, choose between them. Okay, so we've got a nobleman, gentleman style, scholarly dude, a guard, almost. Different body types, I like seeing that. Playing around with like a chibi style. I think you definitely picked the best one of those 3. This guy can work. We're going to talk about some adjustments to make with him, though. Playing around with a couple of colors with it. Okay. The squirrel with the big head is cute. Oh, yeah, I mean, that is cute for sure. Not what we're looking for, but he could definitely paint that up. Or Janie, she could paint that up. And look at the references, kind of interesting. And Baby Yoda, got the stand Napoleon over there. Good pose reference of the archer's position. That general style rendering and squirrel head body. All right, my thoughts are this. Let's start with the Anura. I think overall he has a pretty good demeanor about what you would see in Anura. The Anura in the Spirevale world are a race that are really good running things. They just kind of have a brain for managing and numbers and that sort of stuff. So in most cases, you're going to find them running businesses, running governments, land. They're going to be in places of, organization. And so he's kind of got that. Like, he's smart. He's proud a little bit, but he's a nice guy. So I'm feeling good about that. Now, couple of things. One is the head proportion to the body is actually looking pretty good. That seems pretty close for what we are needing with the Anura. I do want to see maybe a little change with some of the rendering in order to keep it from being a little too cartoonish. We want to bring it back to being slightly more believable. And I think that we'd start by actually making his eyes a little smaller. And otherwise, we're going to be getting into kind of the Baby Yoda territory that if you make the eyes too big on a head, it gives more of a baby impression. And that's not really what we need. So I'm going to say, let's. I'm going to put another white layer on top of this. So if we can get the eyes a little smaller, I think that will be helpful. It'll also allow us to push them further apart and give us some more space between his eyes, which ought to work pretty well. And then something that we want to study some more is the anatomy there around the eye, the eyebrow, how it's leading into the head. Oh my gosh, you're right. 90 Dino Puppet Show. I've got the name. I remember seeing that. Wow. Was it just called Dinosaurs? Yeah. I remember, yeah, the little baby dinosaur. It never said anything. Yeah, but it tried to eat everything. Yeah. Okay. So, this is a really interesting sort of anatomy, and you gotta check to see whether you're going to be following that or not. But the first thing we want to do is understand that the eyes are actually spheres. And the slit that you see on the opening isn't all the way from side to side on the sphere, otherwise it could just come out. The eye has to be bigger than the opening, and then everything around it is following that spherical pattern. You've got to have a eye socket that could host it. Have your nasal cavity. They have a long we're going to have some cranium back here, and we're going to have, yeah, I think we've got to get those eyes a little further apart, because like right now, if that's the opening of the eye, that means that the eye itself, the eyeball, has to be wider than that opening. And then this eye has to be wider than that opening. And it just basically has two eyes, and that's kind of his whole head. Which is why, of course, Baby Yoda, I'm not sure how that anatomy works, because most of its head is eyes as well. It's really adorable. We want to think about that anatomy a little bit and how that's working. And then we want to start placing some of the placing this around it so that we know how it kind of folds up around these shapes. And then how does it come down to the nose? Does it have just this little bitty arch like this? Does it have a wider arch? Does it come down so that wide on the top and sort of comes down like this? Right? We want to just bring a bit more of knowledge of anatomy and design into it, and see what we can do with the mouth as well. Maybe we can break it up into a couple of different sections. Does it have a really clear philtrum that's very visible? Does it have big curl up to it? And then from here, if we've got kind of a saggy face, we're probably going to have this coming down further. Going to have more folds there. And if we're getting like the kind of heavy face, then let's continue that in the body. And the body is going to be more rounded, right? Almost like you're going to be having a water balloon. You hold the water balloon and you just, and all that weight goes to the bottom, right? We've kind of got that sort of thing. He's got a really bottom heavy body. And he's got really no neck to speak of. It's just very thick. He's very thick. And that's why I'm thinking we're also probably got, we want to break this. Probably got thicker legs than that. Really quick thing that you can do on the legs is the back of the thigh flatter, front is curved, and then it's opposite when you get to the shin. And the shin is basically front on the flat on the front and then curved on the back. Hey, Matthew Cooster is a Swatcher. Hey, thanks so much for joining as a member. Oh yeah, I totally forgot to put that on the announcements. If you haven't been joining us and being a channel member and joining us on Wednesdays, we have a whole paint over stream every Wednesday, same time as this stream. And you get to submit in your art every week, and we randomly pick 3 of them. We do 40-minute paint overs of each of them. Hang out, chat on Discord. We have a good time. And yeah, it's $5 a month. You get to submit your art in 4 times. You get 8 hours of extra paint over content. So if you like watching that sort of stuff, make sure you're joining. Okay. We want to make sure that we're thinking about the thickness of that arm as it's coming around his body. All right, same thing here. It looks like we're losing the forearm. We're going to have a shoulder fatness there. Going to come up. Going to really have a thick forearm. And then you're going to have a hand maybe up a little bit higher. All right, looks good. The kind of the fancy design of the clothes, I think that fits for them pretty well. I know the brown hat though, I don't think that's really working with the blues and the violets and the golds. So maybe that can tie into some of the same color as the others. And there's also a little disconnect. If we're going to make him more high elevation in society, then he probably isn't going to have a wooden staff. Let's go ahead and make that out of, either make it a nice carved staff, or it is like gold or something like that. So there's a little disconnect between the kind of peasant-like hat and staff and the more well-to-do design of the clothes. Okay, this one I think is on a lot better track. The pose is working pretty well. And right now, this is where it's pretty generic. We actually want to get a little more unique. We want to get at least a little more details, get some small shapes in there, and give it a little more life with those. Because right now we have large and medium shapes. A couple of things that I would be looking to do is maybe getting that iconic curve to the tail where you can see it looping back on itself, right? I think that's nice. Also, if you're doing a hood like this, a good way to make it more interesting is to keep it from being completely symmetrical. Right? One want to offset it a little bit. Think about if there was a breeze coming in from this side. Automatically, it gives us a little more interest to work with, where one side is going to be higher or lower than the other side, right? The center is going to be off and not perfectly centered on the face. And then we can have one side kind of pressed against him, and the other side is blowing off a little bit. And then we can have the sleeve blowing a little bit. And then we can have, is it a tunic? I'm not sure. That's one of the things that I think maybe we need to rework a little bit, is it looks like it's grass. But usually whatever is the sleeve is one piece. It's a one piece underneath, and then you would have whatever else on top of it. So you could probably have this same thing is what this tunic is that's going down there next to him. And then if he has like another sash or another tabard or something on top of that, that's okay. But those might need to be the same. I'm also looking now to add things like, there's some trim color that goes around the outside, add some color to it. Is there some sort of design woven into his hood? Those would be nice. And I was going to be looking to probably change up the coloring. I'm going to add we want to try to add some color variation there to the face. Like this area around it doesn't just get lighter in the same tone, it actually shifts in colors. And the same thing here. So that part's like really warm, and this part gets lighter, and it also gets a lot cooler. So yeah, we want some of that color variation in there. And we might even do the same thing with like the tail. Maybe the tail shifts to being a little bit different color on the end. Maybe the tail gets to be more reddish or something on the end. And this is where we want a little gradient in with some of these. Small gradients like that can really make a fairly, I want to say bland, a little color bland image being a lot more interesting. It just, a little change just allows your mind to feel that transition from one thing to another thing. Same sort of thing you might want to use on some of the rest of this, maybe on the feet. I think the pose is working. I'm liking that. See what we can do besides just leaves. They don't really just wear leaves and stuff. I mean, they're a civilized race. They fabricate fabrics and clothing. All right, that'll be it for those. I like what you're doing, Janie. I think you've got this. Just make sure that you're going back on the anatomy with the Anura. Take a look at some other examples of hunters, fighters, that sort of thing from other games, and see if the how you can dress him up and give some more added details, and think about maybe accoutrements. Does he have any extra knives or anything like that with him? Inlim says, I wonder if the frog guy should have a cane instead. I kind of like that idea. I think the cane would actually fit him better than a full magic staff, because he seems more like the mayor of a decent sized town, He seems like that sort of guy, and so a cane would make sense. Joakim is up. Pulled that up earlier. Clint, I've chosen the Zez and Arbelon. This is how far I've come. As you can see, I've added color to the Arbelon, but it is more just to show what I'm thinking. I would go back to work on the value and figure. I'm still not totally sure if I like the clothes, but maybe a little flower would help. I'm assuming flower on the Zez. Can I work with any color for the background? Let's just stick with white. That is almost always what they ask you for with these types of commissions. Just plain white background. Can I add some ground for them to stand on? Usually no. Usually no. Usually you need to submit things in like this, right? Just the character over nothing. If anything, you can do that. I think with the idea that him setting down, if they were in a setting position, you need to show what they were setting on. So having a rock there makes sense, but we don't need any other plants. We don't need other rocks. We don't need any of that. He doesn't need anything. He's okay. Okay, so let's look at his concepts. Another one where we have a great variety of different shapes here. The big-headed one, basic limbs. This is more of an elemental. Okay, we're all good. I definitely think that you chose the best one of those to represent the Zez. The other ones feel maybe too monstery. Yeah, or too much like a regular just earth element. I think that one's definitely working the best for them. And then we have the Arbelon, a bird version. That one's actually working quite well there. But the bard works well as well. Inspiration image. Ooh, look at that. I don't know where you found that one, but that's a good reference image. Played around with the lighting, kind of a top lighting, side lighting. Go to the colors a bit. All right. The idea of sitting on a rock, kicking back a little bit, playing some folk music, I think that fits the Arbelon well. But I do feel like you're getting lost in the animal too much. And we're pushing actually over into canine a little bit. And we want to make sure that we're bringing that back to squirrel. The squirrel really needs to be very, very clear. And let's talk about maybe some of the reasons why. One of them is at this angle, you're getting the front view, and that's easier to get that sort of dog face with. Now we can make it work, but the other thing is the tongue sticking out. Where that we need to get rid of the tongue sticking out. It's okay. You found a picture with a squirrel with its tongue out. Okay, it's cute, but it doesn't need to serve and represent the entire race. Is them squinting with their tongue out. So we need to back that up from being such a unique thing to just a normal squirrel face. And they can just be, they can be kind of happy, but we don't need a unique expression happening. And we also want to look at the shapes. And one of the things that is really key about getting squirrels and other animals is how the eyes are situated on the head. That there is a common separation between animals. The eyes can be here, eyes be here. And that is a separation between predators and prey. Predators have their eyes on the front of their heads. We as humans are predator, right? That's why our eyes are on the front. And allows us to have extreme focus and really good depth perception in one specific area. And because we're the attackers, we don't really care what's around us as much. So that's why our eyes are there. Prey aren't that way. Prey have their eyes situated further on the sides of their heads because they have to always be on the alert for something trying to kill them because they're not at the top of the food chain. And that's what we have here. Now, dogs have their eyes closer together than squirrels do. And that's why we get a little more of that dog feeling because they're more predatorial eye distance placement. So we've got to watch this. Like, notice how we almost see from the front, you are practically seeing the eyes from the sides, right? Now we've got yours and you've turned them in, so we're looking at them from the front. We've got to watch that. Now, we can keep the general pose, we can keep the general idea, but we do need to make it go back and redraw the anatomy. We want to, go put a white box over it, and then you want to start going back and redrawing it. Now, I did that a little earlier like this, right? And first I just looked at I looked at what this guy did, pulled this up on Pinterest. I don't know who did it, but this is a good thing to look at. Something like this, do some practices like this. We should and can be able to represent a squirrel very quickly in very simple shapes. What makes them look like them? And then we went to translate that over. One of the things that I saw was there were little bean bodies like this. You start with, basically they have a very round head, a point on it, a very short point. That's something else that changes between animals. How long that nuzzle area, right? And so you've got the very round head, very small chest, a narrow chest, and we're elongating it a little bit so he can stand more upright. And then fairly large hip area and stomach area, right? Fairly large, unless he's sucking it in because he's moving. So you've got that, right? And then the large hips. You always have those large hips. And then the arms, again, we're looking at those arms. Wide on the shoulder. Wide on the shoulder. Very narrow at the wrist. We want that as well. Wide. Coming down to narrow. So that's what I was looking at on yours. Right? Round, very short nuzzle area. That was too much. For races that cross humans, usually one baby and one that have litters, would showing multiple sets of smaller breasts on females be too weird or rejected? For something like this, yeah, you just want to keep with the normal two breasts, human-like. And you do actually see that sometimes, but mainly for monster races, because it strikes us as weird when we see something that's humanoid with multiple rows of breasts. Even on this one, I could probably even push that feather. Make sure that that eye is way off over here. We're looking at this eye shape. Well, I was drawing the eye orbit, the whole eye ball. That rounding there. And then you've got that shape around the eye. Iconic for squirrels. And what kind of squirrel ears you want to give him, that's kind of up to you. There are a variety of different kinds of squirrel ears. And then looking in that nose area. And then that small chest and wide area there on the arm, getting very narrow here to the hand. We may need to put the guitar up next to that thigh, because that thigh has to be pretty big here. And maybe he has that foot kicked out further. And then that one's tucked up underneath him more. Fiddle, banjo. Banjo instruments there. Then we can toss that sash, that hanging down the other side. Make sure we know where that is. We could show probably as a traveler. He's like a traveling bard. That's cool. In which case he probably has like bedroll. Maybe you see a mug hanging off on the side back there. He has a couple of things like that. Maybe has a hat on the ground. Somebody's tossed some coins into it. I don't know. Maybe that's taking too far. We don't really need that. Start to just building too much story into that. But something we could think about is getting more of the squirrel tail. That's not quite fitting. So we do want to look to establish more of the squirrel tail behind him. This is feeling too much like a different kind of animal. Yep. The rope, cool. He has like a pickaxe or something there as well. Whatever. For the Zez, overall, I think the pose is looking really good. And I like that. I especially like the whole headpiece, the way that it sort of splits, and there's some odd little face kind of going on in there. A lot of these shapes to me felt too ambiguous, almost too monstery. Like either weird contorting flesh or just an odd elemental. Could you zoom out a bit? The webcam was over the drawing. Oh yeah, I need to keep that over here. Okay, so these are the main, like the silhouette is working pretty well, the pose is working pretty well, but how these look, what they're made of, doesn't strike me as being mushroom-like, tuber-like, and so that's where I would try to do something with it. And that's where I was thinking of like this, where you'd have a radish, you know, and it's got the little splits in the radish, and you can use those to help tell the contour. And then, you know, on the ends of the radish, it gets really, really pale, and you have those kind of wiggly little tails on them, like roots. And that's kind of what he's got here, but they're bendable. And I don't really see this race as being ones that utilize tools. They're not that sort of being. But so in that case, I was thinking probably take out the staff and just have him like releasing some kind of little mushroom, like floaty mushrooms, almost like a dandelion sort of thing, right? Kind of floating off. I think that would make sense, and that would work for him. That shape's looking pretty good. I usually see where these guys, though, up under here, they're not just perfect curves. Like if we look over here, they're very angular. Angle, 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 angle. And so we want to do more of kind of have this clear angle change. Not just a perfect, smooth, curvy thing. And the end of this, you get a little wobbly. Look how wobbly the end of that is, right? Ours is keeping a little too perfect. Some areas things down more than others, and it overlaps some of the stuff behind it. I probably want to have some fun making that extra wobbly. And then we want to vary the size of some of these up here on top. We don't want them all the same. Having some up there is good. I like the idea of them being up there, but we do want to vary those. So yeah, I'd be taking it that way. I think you have an excellent little character there. Yeah, some sort of little spores. I would just make them look like little, really lightweight, maybe semi-translucent mushrooms trying to get released. Now we'll be taking a look at work by Kalinarku. All right, maybe this is the first time I don't recognize that name in the challenge. It says, I struggled a lot with the Zez concept and still am not satisfied with the results. Also, I did an Arbelon sketch with a long cleric-like dress, but I was not sure if that was a good representation of the whole race. So I kept this sketch clear and simple until next phase. Grateful of any advice on the clothing. Okay. Per usual, let's start by taking a look at the character concepts. We've got like one walking, something over his shoulder, traveling pouch. Have more of that long dress type you were talking about. And then we have Zez concept. So yeah, this is the one that you sent a message to me. So they sent me a message with this concept and saying, okay, have I gone too far? And it was actually a really good question because something was telling them, hey, I don't know that this is right. What should I be doing with this? And yeah, I think this is a good indication of when something's getting a little too unique and it's also getting a little too clearly monster, where that's not really what this race is. This race is one of those races that's largely connected to the world. One of the elemental races that often are not good or bad, but depends how you interact with them. So you don't want to sell them as being monsters. They are kind of like a wild animal. It's not for you or against you, but how you treat it could really change how the encounter goes. All right, so we got a variety of different ones there. All right, this is another one where the balance between the human and the squirrel probably needs to be adjusted. Basically, now what we have is a human with a squirrel head. And we want to make sure that we're finding a better balance there. The general walking pose, holding a staff, that's fine. But let's make some tweaks. So I went over it earlier, and this is what I came up with. I'll just pull that over a little bit, and you can see that difference here. Okay, we're going to start with is we're going to try to get rid of some of the supporting stuff. Generally, you don't have any supporting thing around your character. So we're going to take out the bird. We're going to take out the ground. Just the character. If they have a prop, such as a staff, put the prop in there. Okay. Now, with the head, this is one where we really need, again, look at the squirrel, look at the proportions, and look at the placement of the features. So, one of the things that you want to start with is pushing that eye back more. That the eye is feathered towards the ear. We look at the reference. You see there's really not much space in between the eye and the ear. And the face is very round. Basically, it's a big circle with one circle added on the end of it. And that's already halfway embedded in the head circle, the sphere. We're talking 3D. And here what we have is something that's more angular, and that's more akin to what you would find with dog or with a bear, you know, other animals like that. Well, let's make sure that we're really playing into that roundness, like you have here. A very short muzzle area. And then moving that eye back and really looking at that diamond shape, or that diamond shape. Drop there, where it gets pinched on each of those corners. Classic eye shape. We've got like mainly just a circle eye right now. We want to get that here, bring that back, and then look at the size of the mouth. Oh, beady mouth, beady mouth. Ours is getting a little big there, so trying to get that a little smaller. This is now where we're getting into, there's some ambiguity here because it hasn't been set, right? This isn't a race that's been set before. But we need to get away from so much of the long neck, the human neck to it. No, there we go. With these sort of characters, we're wanting to go with that narrow, not the narrow neck. We're trying to get where the neck is almost non-existent. It's all up under the fur. And so it just kind of goes from the head and goes straight into the shoulder. Now there might be a little curve here, but it's not going to be much. You're going to have kind of like a little definition there, and then immediately it's going to go into the body. Probably a little wide here. I'm going to adjust that. Upper body. Okay, something more on that line where she probably has more of the kickback, where her back is doing more of this curve instead of this curve. We're looking at narrowing the shoulders up and then letting the hips stay nice and wide. And that gives us a bit more of that squirrel body with the larger lower body. More of the squirrel legs. We're just extending them out a bit more so that she can walk a bit more like a human. I think the sort of way that you've handled the digigrade there is actually working pretty well. We can stay with most of that. We do want to go with the wide arms. It's not the arms are muscular or big, but the hair connects. Essentially, that skin fold connects down here, right? Towards the bottom of the rib cage. Not where it is on us, which is, you know, real high and tight. So it's going to be there is kind of where it's connecting. And then with the staff, since she's carrying the staff and she's moving, it's unlikely she's going to be able to hold it completely vertically. So we will get a little tilt to that staff that helps sell the motion a little bit. And again, let's go with more of a classic squirrel tail, where it's more bushy and not so much point. Clothing style wise, we probably want to put some more layers on her. This is kind of like a standard, kind of t-shirt design. Back up. Just go look up Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder sort of characters, and you're looking for like just kind of an average adventuring ranger. I forget who did this art, but something on this kind where you're looking at adding some more layers. Maybe, you know, a leather chest piece like that works really well. Having a cloak wrapped around the neck is nice. Multiple belts, couple of pouches on the sides is good. Some very light armor bits like this. Some pieces down the thighs, a shoulder piece, some bracers. that sort of thing. Nothing too bulky. That's where I would look. There's like standard fare about what you could have on a traveling character. This one, I mean, that one's also nice too. That's more of a winter terrain, but the layers of fabrics and ties on top of them, that's nice. You can even have her in fur, but for something that's already covered in fur, that seems a little odd. Okay, for the Zez, yeah, this is actually where I had that other image. I was thinking of the. Here we have the radish, right? Turnip, not a turnip. I don't eat either of them. And now that I say, I'm like, oh, I don't know. And I'm thinking that we probably need to get into some of those shapes a bit more. Particularly love the way that Konstad, the artist on this one here, the way that he was able to get this sort of shapes out of the form in the body. So like I feel like that whole body and that hand is a vegetable, right? And the patterning, the shapes of it, the way that it bends, it all feels very vegetable-like. And for a lot of your body, I think that you're probably needing to run with something very similar, where you've kind of got a big kind of tuber form here that comes down, and then it's got arms that are more like this. They're like tubers, except for maybe they've got a joint, and then there's another smaller one, and then there's kind of another one of these joints, and then that's where it goes off into the little tails. And so now you've got like a big one, and then you have another form, and then it kind of breaks off, and then you have the little tail pieces that come off from that. And then this is where you could have a lot of that size that you're looking for, but it's not going to just be ambiguous sort of shapes. And then when you get down here, it can be the same sort of thing, where you've got like several different shapes where this is breaking down into multiple little tubers. I do want to see more mushrooms out of it, though. We've got some odd shapes, but they're feeling more like, again, just kind of an elemental, but not necessarily mushroom-like. So can we get maybe some big mushroom around here? I almost wish that he had a big mushroom like on his back, just so there'd be one good clear mushroom shape, and then we could have some smaller ones up around this sort of head shape. Yeah. Also, look at his hand. That can almost be the exact sort of thing you're using over here, right? And then for his staff, see if we can't do the same sort of thing here, right? Let's turn this thing into a mushroom staff. Get some mushrooms going off of this as well. Cool stuff. Olivia. All right, Olivia says, hey Clint, struggled through the decision-making process. I may have animated the great sword, so I'm considering taking that down a notch. I think so. No major change there, but I'd agree. It's a little bulky for him. I need some tightening on my Anura's values, and I'm not confident in the color choice. Maybe darken the background. Thank you for all of your help. You're welcome. Thank you. So I'm with you. Great sword. Don't mind it being large, but let's probably take it down to here. We're getting into like major barbarian territory with that size. I mean, it can be fairly long. Probably look at that. I personally really like that Anura design. I think both of these are rendered really well, but let's take a look at your concepts. We got a pike wielding guy here. These are all really, really nice. Excellent examples. Only one, good anatomies, good posing. Yep. Good. You're continuing a lot of the same designs, like the helmet and the overall designs, and just modifying it. Okay, that's good. These are all good examples. Good posing. No, he's turning to look at something. He's examining something. Another one, he's examining it. He's looking through it. She has a floating book, reaching up, performing some bit of magic. So those are really nice. Other things, yeah, somebody just mentioned it. Nito says the whiskers are cool. This is an excellent point, and something really worth remembering is when you're trying to come up with a unique race. A good way to do that is to bring in influence from some other kind of creature. Now, I actually did a sketch of a Nura the other day because I was curious how to approach it. And I ended up getting a bit of like a hamster feel to it. And I really liked that design. I think this one is also completely viable. Went with more of a salamander or catfish thing. The whiskers immediately make it feel very unique. Takes it out of being halfling, dwarf, gnome, and the rest of the smaller races. And the coloring, keeping away from those pink skin tones, letting it be in that gray, blue, green area, again, makes it more unique. And I would buy this as a standalone, interesting race. The posing is working well, and proportions here is a big thing for these guys. And if you look at this, these are pretty much comical proportions, but they work really well because her head is tilted in some fabric. But we don't actually have many headlings here. She's pretty much just 3 headlings tall. You've got the legs up to the belt, chest up to the chin, chin to the top of the head. But that's what works for these characters. Okay, let's change this up. For these sort of things, you're not really ever. I don't know that I've ever been allowed to have like background tones and stuff with them. Let's get rid of the black stuff. I'll just keep it where there's no background tone. And if she wants to be reaching up with like a crystal, that's fine. You can have a crystal, right? But we actually need to draw the crystal and not put stuff behind it so you can see it. Whatever the crystal is. Maybe she's got some floating crystals up here and she's reaching up towards them, or you could have maybe some runes, or some sort of pattern that she's writing in air. I can't say much about the drawing. It's all looking pretty well to me. I maybe expect some more folds here. As it's compressing with her arm being held up, it's all kind of going to be falling back down. Then I expect perhaps that this feels like it's maybe sliding a little bit off of her head. This is getting nitpicky, but I think this probably needs to pull around there a bit more. Have the proper turn around the head. All stuff. That's what we're talking about on this one because this very successful. The light eyes there in the middle, it gives a really interesting look. I kind of like that. I can almost see doing this sort of thing or this sort of thing. I hadn't thought about it until I saw this. I'm doing like almost a two-tone kind of skin tone. Like part of the skin is one tone, or it has some sort of pattern in it. If you make it not look like age spots. Maybe have like a pattern kind of coming down the nose. That could work with them. If that interests you, run with that and see what you got. Just for kicks, I would probably have some of these pages. Still sort of moving. She's using magic to hold this thing up. I'm thinking that the magic could also be making a lot of the pages want to float. And you could show that same blue glow around the rest of it. And you get a more interesting silhouette off of that. So several pages are kind of. Yep. That would be another thing, is if you wanted to add just a little breeze. I don't want to say that like a lot of wind, but it'd be a small thing to just get a little breeze out of maybe some of these. Letting them move around a little bit. Color-wise, you're basically going with kind of two different tones here. So I was actually just looking at a little guide on this. I think it was yesterday. Somebody had showed on their little tutorial, if you got two colors that you want to divide it 70-30%. 70% of it's one color, and then the second color is 30. Instead, if you had three colors, I can spell colors right. It was 60-30-10. So 60 and 30 would be very similar, and the 10 would be very dissimilar. So whichever one you want with that, I'd probably have some of these not being in the same value. Like, I kind of like the idea that this one is darker, and then it's being used multiple places, and it's also just a duller fabric. Maybe this is too. So they're not all getting as shiny or light as the rest. And then you kind of got the lighter blue. That's nice. Maybe these lighter blue. Yeah, that could be the same darker tone. You can just have it like charcoal. Doesn't apply to anything. Then your green, I guess that would actually be the same. That's then your offset color would be some sort of green tone, and maybe that's a little more vibrant. You've got one of them that has a little more kick than the others do. Unless you want to go with the purple. You do have the little purple beads up here. Ink. Kind of works though. If you want to keep that green maybe toned down a little bit, you could actually use the purple as the extra. Maybe she has like purple bands or stuff. Or this could actually be purple as well if you wanted that to be the 10% color. You just have a few things, maybe trim pieces. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about Arbelon character. Well rendered. I'm kind of mixed on this. Not because it isn't a good concept, but because I don't know if it's a fitting concept for what we're needing for this. Generally for race images, you're not really wanting to go for action poses. Because it gives a connotation that the entire race is very aggressive and warrior-like. This seems like it would be more fitting to example what a warrior, barbarian, or fighter is, rather than representing the entire race. And on that, I'm kind of split here. So I usually answer these as kind of the art director for this fictional project and as just your art teacher. As an art director, I would probably ask you to come up with a different, more passive pose, because I don't want to cast the impression that the entire race is very aggressive fighters. And like, this is nominal enough that I can imagine they can do other things. And some of these other ones are more passive, especially that one. That one's really passive. That would be probably closer. But this is where I'm going to split. I'm actually going to leave it up to you with this one, Olivia. If you like this, then finish it. We'll recognize that it's probably not the best example for the race. But if you want to do this as an illustration, okay, go and finish it. It's a subject that we asked for. Go ahead and do it and then send it in. I'm not going to give you a hard time about it. So that's up to you. Project wise, I would see a rework, but also just kind of understand the amount of time that it takes to do these things, and people can't always just start. Okay, if you're continuing with this, a couple of things that I'm thinking is we've got to get more of a bend on this arm, right? Right now it's almost arcing the wrong way. We practically have an upward arc thing. We also have an upward arc there with that arm, and we do still need to see that curve to it there at the elbow. As we mentioned, we're looking at that wide space here at the top. No wrist down here. I don't know that the legs look right to me. They were odd to do. I'd be checking on that. And we may even see the sword going back more horizontally, right? More perspective, instead of just upright. This is one of the major things that kind of gets me, though. The idea is interesting. The idea that they would utilize their tail almost like an extra limb in order to carry a shield for them. It's an interesting idea, but I have a little problem with it because squirrel tails there's not much there. Like, the actual muscle and bone is like this much. There's only like that much muscle and bone. This is all just fur. It's it's like a fluffy cat, right? You ever give a fluffy cat a bath? You know, you got fluffy cat, you get the cat in the bath and give her a scrub. You only got this much cat inside of all that fluff. And so that's why, like, when I look at it, I go, okay, the idea is kind of neat, but there's no way that little bitty thin squirrel tail could hold up a shield, right? Which let me pull it up and see. Here's Discord. Oh, not Discord. OBS. Yeah, there she is. For everybody that wanted to see Fuzzy, since we're talking about kitties, she's right there sleeping on her little chair. So that's her new spot right now. Yeah, she's been a good buddy. She's just hanging out right there all the time. So the idea of having a shield-bearing tail, I feel like that would work really well for races like lizardmen that have pretty strong, thick, muscly tails, but not so much for a squirrel. So here I would be looking to change that that tail position so that it followed this sort of fur, right? Because it's an extension of their spine. And so the spine's coming down here, it's coming out there, and so you're going to have that tail coming off this way or doing something like that, right? Yeah. That's what I'm thinking. Either adjusting that design and going that way with it, or going to one of your other concepts. I think either one of these probably has a better version of a more passive pose. Yeah. That's the main thing I was going to talk about there. Design-wise, I'm really liking it. I particularly like the sort of headpiece. That seems like something that would be very unique for that specific race that accommodates their unique skull and ear positioning. The little side bits, nice action of those blowing around. I like the face is looking good, and the shapes of the ears are good. I like the layering of the clothes. You've got that classic medieval sort of stitched, padded clothing that they had, and then the piece underneath that, little side pieces. I'd probably see about maybe giving him a side knife. Usually a warrior like that is going to have a main weapon and some sort of backup weapon in case they lose their main weapon. So maybe they have a side knife, on a pouch here, or maybe one even strapped to the thigh down there. That might be a good place for one, is there next to the thigh. I've got the ties down there around the limbs. Those are good. Okay, good stuff. And the last one to take a look at is Tyler. Right, Tyler. It says, sorry for the messy template. No worries, man. All your stuff is there. I didn't want to focus on the value and lighting. That's fine. And cool concept for the decent foundation. Hey. Well, let's take a look at Tyler's stuff. Now, Tyler, like several of the others, do what I encourage you to do, making use of the Discord. Tyler's been out there. He's been working on his concepts over the last 2 weeks. Put it up there, getting feedback from the community. People are happy to give you feedback, especially when you do this like A, C, D, pick your favorite, let me know which ones you like. It's a good way to get feedback, and sometimes that's really needed because when you're staring at it for so long, you can miss obvious things, or you get caught up in a concept that really isn't what you need. And other people look at it with fresh eyes as a nonpartisan viewer, and sometimes they can see stuff and help get you back on the right track. We even toss some ideas out to you. So if you do post it up there, and I encourage you to do, we do have several rooms for just getting feedback, then note what you would like to see feedback on. Help direct the people so that they know what to comment on. Say, do you feel like these are getting too monstery? Do you feel like these are too this? Do you feel like these have good enough silhouettes? Do you think the poses are working? Is it clear what he's doing? help direct the feedback, and you'll find it being more worth your while. All right. Here is the concepts for the Zez. This is another example of great variety of shapes. The silhouettes, a lot of varied silhouettes here. You got things like long arms and 4 legs versus long thin arms and 2 legs. Wide head, very narrow head. Very thick body, very thin bodies. 4 arms versus 2 arms. In this sort of brainstorming place, that's how you want to approach it. I think several of these are looking good. I think several of these work really well as the beginnings of an earth elemental, or even some other kind of elemental, but are getting too far away from the mushroomy Zez. The Arbalon, you've got them standing, reaching, looking. Those are all pretty good. Looks like maybe you're getting a little too much of the relying on environment to go with it. Because in a book, you're probably going to have enough room to show them. You're not going to necessarily have room to show a bunch of other stuff going on around them. And then you did some color variations with those. Some quick color variations of Arbalon. That's a really nice piece. And I would have included that had I come across that. Volta. If I'm not mistaken, I met the guy who runs Volta before. That's the same Volta I'm thinking of. He was putting together an illustration company. And he only had a couple of people there, but he was nice. Different body type, the long sort of gorilla body type. That's a good place to start there. Pose reference of Mundo. I think I played Mundo only in random. I don't think I've ever purposely chose to play Mundo. But heck, maybe they totally reworked him since the last time I played. Okay, let's start with the Arbalon. Rendering is clean. Didn't spend a lot of time doing details of colors, but I have the general idea of how you're going to approach it. The biggest thing, by far the biggest thing to direct on this one is size. This is making the character look like they are really, really little because the butterflies are really, really big compared to the character. But we have to remember that she is, say, like 3.5 to 4 feet tall. Like was that like 1.25 to 1.4 meters, something like that. I think that's too much. No, it wouldn't be that much. It'd be like up to 1.25 meters. And so we've got to really scale that down. And then we need to back away from so much of the nature stuff that, again, makes it feel like she's normal squirrel size. Oh, I should have guessed that. M says the mushroom guy is by Maxim Varian. Yeah, I should have guessed that. Now that you say it, like, of course he did that. I think the pose is working well, and her general impression, her attitude, that's working well. So keeping as much as we can, but adapting it in the ways that need to be adapted. This is what I'm thinking. We're going to adjust her a bit. We're going to pull away from her being dressed in things that make her look little and surrounded by things that make her look little. So instead of butterflies, we're going to make her a falconer. Right? Now she's going to have a falcon coming down. Alighting on her hand. Maybe she already has another falcon. Setting up there, right? And then we're going to give her a falconer's glove. Okay. And then she'll all keep the same sort of color scheme. She's still wearing the greens and the browns and the earthy colors. And I think maybe she's got some berries or something, little berries that maybe the falcons want to eat, or chunks of food. I don't know. But she's got that sort of thing, and that would work well. Let's see. Let's give her a bit more of some sort of standard dress. Right now, we just kind of got two odd little pieces of fabric hanging down. Let's see what we can see in here, what some other people have done. And that might fit a little better. Yeah, even like a longer dress of that kind can work. You could give her long kind of tights, high boots, that sort of thing works. Several sashes. Cloak. So let's try to give her maybe actual pants, or give her a longish tunic thing coming down, maybe some ties around her, or not really her calves. It's actually her forefoot. Yeah. And then with this, can we turn her mantle into something that has a leaf design on it, but not actually be leaves? And that's where we want to try to get kind of the iconography of the nature and added into the clothing. Yeah. And then over here, I almost feel like, can we turn this into something that is somehow useful for falconry? Like the top of this is formed in a particular way for them to land on. Maybe there's like a bell on the end of it for some reason. She can ring the bell and that's when they come. Or it's painted in a particular bright color that they can recognize that color from a distance and then come to land on it. Maybe having the area that she grips most often wrapped with some sort of leather or white fabric in order just to give it some more visual general interest. And also, let's just check the size of it. I feel like maybe the tail, taking it down to more of this size. Yeah. This tail is just getting a bit big. We want to take it down probably a maximum of something in that range. So we need to take off a bit of it there. Okay. Over here, we're looking at the Zez. Okay, I like the proportions. The proportions are working well as taking it away from being too human. And that's very important. But for me, this is getting a bit too monstery. There's not enough of the mushroom. Like, we've got one clear mushroom. And the rest just feels kind of monstery to me. So can we keep as much of it as possible and then make more of it be more mushroom, tuber, turnip, something in that vein? Because from a distance, these don't read as mushrooms. They just as kind of big, bulgy, I don't know, nothing good. So like giving him one giant one on the head. Now his basically has a giant one on the head that's consisted of multiple little ones, and that's nice. All along a lot of these duller areas, he has them growing up. Same sort of thing over here. Gives them 4 arms in order just to make them feel odd. How can we get a more interesting thing here? I'm almost thinking that instead of having one massive one all the way across the back, like maybe it kind of, you've almost got this split tone, right? Like the top is one color and underneath is another color, and that sort of continues down his body. And so kind of clear that he's got one there. I'm almost want to lean into this. If you want to use those, I almost feel like we could make that more of part of his unique silhouette. But can we also get those to be more mushroom-like? There are mushrooms instead of just kind of ambiguous little shapes that come up. Can we get some that they have longer bodies than your standard mushroom that most people think of? They've got kind of ribs to them. And then they come up, and then they've got kind of tall bell sort of mushrooms on the top of there. And so that's what I would change up here. Again, we're just trying to get more of that mushroom type. And then it's nice and thin, the neck. Then you've got more of the wide kind of bulb base to it. And that gives us a mix between the two. And I'd go with more of those. Make sure we have some kind of coming towards us a little bit so they can overlap the other ones. And then we get smaller and smaller ones as they're kind of coming up over the head area. And that's mainly there on the back. We can even have some more kind of growing off the back there. And then this is where we get into some interesting things with character design, where you're establishing a two-tone sort of thing, where there's almost a divider line. I don't think you almost like the divider line here, right? On Constads, where the palm is one, and then that's a different tone there. And if you guys aren't familiar with his work, I'm gonna just talk, shout out a name. What is his first name? I've got a whole folder. Alex Constad. And go check out his work. Really, really nice stuff. This is a full version there. Check that out. A stowaway. There's something about stowaways was for this card. But you can see that if you want to see the full. But so here, one of the things we want to think about from a design standpoint is that the back, very noisy, lots of sharp little detail-y shapes. The inside, very smooth, like that, right? And so we have a contrast. This side, gentle, smooth, low detail. This side, lots of detail, lots of movement, right? And we want to do the same sort of thing here. Here on the underside, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this up a little bit. Oh, wrong layer. There we go. So, the normal part there where you see some of those don't know, little kind of rib stuff that comes down from the underside of the mushroom, that it actually just sort of drops down into what you would call the face, right? And then it kind of drops down into this other area. And then once it gets to here, you've got more of kind of the gentle tuber shapes that we had on the other one. I don't guess I have that open anymore. Yeah, we're looking at more of these shapes, right? And so we're going to have these kind of big bulbous shapes, and you're going to have those tears in it. Those little light tears where you can see through the outermost part of it. And then in those tears, you are going to have a little different color. And then you're going to have some like black spots and that sort of thing from dirt. And so that's what I'm thinking here, is that this goes into a much paler color. You have really colorful stuff up here. If I still have, I'm going to go into horses. Like, I've got vegetables somewhere. These guys. Yeah, something like this, right? So you got like the really bright color on the top of him. And that's where all the little mushrooms are, and you have a variation of purples and oranges and reds and that sort of stuff. And on the underside, you have that pale sort of color, sort of like this. And down here is where you've got some simpler curves. And again, I'm thinking of kind of like your bulbous shapes, almost like a potato, multi-jointed potato. And then like a potato, if you leave it long enough, it starts sprouting. That's one of the cool things about potatoes, is that it becomes its own incubator for growing. And so you've got that coming out. And then you almost have the opposite here, right? Where you've got kind of a break in the form there, and you've got all those little, you've got all these little guys, all the little tails, right? And I like the little extra bits on the tails. And you could have those coming off there as well. Right? Usually you've got like the little ones. So you've got several of those tails that come on, and then they collect up together. And it's pretty much going in reverse. So this would be the shoulder, and then you've got tails coming out, or it could be like this would be the shoulder, and then it comes out to the arm. And then you've kind of got this big tuber-like shape here. And then that's where you start having more of your long mushrooms, but they're just smaller. We don't need them as big. They're the same sort of design, so you're mimicking those. And I think the hands pretty much need to be going along with same, very similar to the same sort of hands you've got over there, unless you want to be going into like tuber tail fingers, which you could do. You could just turn these into little tails. And then they could all have their little, they all have the little tendrils that come off of them as well, like the little you've got like little tail pieces sort of coalescing on the top of a big unit. Got some those little tears giving you a little contour information. Maybe you even have a few little ones coming off there. And then you've got some of the... I'm thinking on the underside, you probably don't have many of the mushrooms, just mainly on the outside. I'm having fun with this design. This design, I feel like there was so much to work with it. I really don't want to see restart it. A lot of this is working. We just need to shift over from being ambiguous elemental stuff to being shapes that work better for what we need. Here we go. And remember, we're looking for bright colors on the back. And then very pale colors. Simple colors there. And look for gradients. We don't need major gradients. We just need some gradient. Not mistaken, he did that on his. Yeah, we've got like a gradient of colors where it goes from duller to brighter, violet to more reddish. Even on the hands, right? You can see that where it goes like warmer to cooler, more saturated to less saturated, that sort of thing. And probably doing that on the body as well. Maybe the pale tone goes from like being warmer at the top, cooler at the bottom, vice versa, a little lighter, a little paler, that sort of thing. Okay, well, I'm going to stop it there. I think that should be all the entries. I've already jumped. Yeah, that was the last one. But, yeah. Now, there are... Yeah, next week is Group 2. They will be doing a different set of challenge, okay? Because we didn't sell all the tickets for this challenge. So I created a different set of races for Group 2 to do. So if you want to tune in next Friday at the same time, we'll be going over the Hasori, which is a human type. A very dark skin tones, natural occurring golden designs in the skin, golden eyes. They're sort of a desert nomadic people. Then the second one is the Ogre Moth, which is an ogre variation that has 4 arms, that has more fur. And if you want to see those, tune in. Now, all those tickets have been sold. But if you want to have your own go at any of these, I do make the descriptions and the inspiration images available for you out on Discord. You feel free to go out there, give it a shot, get some feedback from the group. But if you want feedback from me, you do have to get tickets at the beginning of the challenge. Okay, yeah, if you guys have any last minute questions, feel free to toss them in there into the chat here, and I'll try to address them. It looks like Matthew has a comment. Quick random question. What size canvas and proportions do you like to work in? Just curious. When I'm sketching, if I would just set up a normal sketching page, it's probably going to be 4,000 by 3,000. And then once I get set on that, then I will double my resolution. And so it'll basically be 6 by 8,000. And that's when I'm doing my final. So that's just a go-to for me. But that could change depending on... It could change depending on how it's going to be used. If it's on a card, and I know it's never going to be used more than a card, it doesn't really need to be... doesn't need to be 8,000 pixels because photo resolution is 300 pixels per inch. So that would be over 20 inches, and that's overkill for something that's never going to be used very big. But like on a Magic card, like some that I got in just the other day, they sometimes do print these on banners at events, or they will share the entire image that can be downloaded as a background for computer screens. And so it does need to be well detailed. Sometimes they use it in marketing images on book covers, that sort of stuff. And so it does need to have enough detail. I usually don't run into any problems at 8,000, 7,000, 8,000. I think is probably good. I have pushed that up to 10,000 pixels before for certain images. I know a particular image, marketing image that I did that had multiple characters. It never did get used, but I did need to push it up to that level because I knew that each character in the image needed to be able to be used on their own. And so we had to have the overall size of the canvas big enough that you could cut out any one part and it be able to hold up on its own. My PC can't handle more than 5,000, especially if I'm using. Yeah, if you're especially if you're using multiple layers, 5,000 is probably fine. At that point, I usually don't like working in a lot of layers at high resolution. It just slows things down. And so I will increase the size as I decrease the number of layers. Yeah. Okay, well, if you have more comments or questions or anything, feel free to put them in the comments below. And also, hey, just to help, the channel out and the video out, put a comment below of what your favorite concept was. Who did your favorite concept? Or what was your favorite bit of information? Or what did you find most interesting about this episode? And I'm thinking of some more videos and stuff to do coming up. I have an idea for a Vibrance episode. It needs to get recorded. So that will be continuing as well. All right, that's it for now. Thank you so much for joining. And until I see you next time.